Operators, Booleans, and selection in JavaScript. Operators in JavaScript are the symbols that will allow us to create different expressions in JavaScript. And here are just a few of them. We've already seen the plus sign and the equal sign, which remember, equals is an assignment operator. There's also minus, and the asterisk is used to multiply, and the forward slash is used to divide. And the percent is a modules operator. If you want to find out more about operators, you could come over to the W3 Schools website and look at the different operators. They'll get all listed here, comparison operators and logical operators and all kinds of stuff here. So you can come through and find all the details about all of the different operators if you want to there. But we're just going to start with a few of them so that it's not too overwhelming. And most of the operators are very similar to what you would find in other C-based programming languages, C, C++, C#, Objective-C, so on and so forth. Okay, so there's also Booleans in JavaScript, and it's very nice to know that a Boolean can have two values, true or false, and that's it. So here I'm making a variable called happy, and I've assigned it the value of true. Notice that true is not inside quotes. JavaScript knows what true means. True is a keyword that means that something is true, and false is a keyword that means that something is false. So I have a variable here, sad, that's false. I can use an if statement to check to see if something is true. So if happy, now happy has assigned true to it, so it's going to do something here. If I were to replace happy with sad, then the else would fire instead of the if, and we would do something down here if happy was false. Or if I changed the value here from true to false, then happy would be false, and it would do this down here. So that gets us started with a little bit of that. So next, we're going to move to our code editor and make a file and try working with some selections and Booleans and that kind of fun stuff. Here I am in my code editor, and I'm going to make a new file. And I'm going to make a file. I'm going to, before I do anything, I'm going to save the file. Save, and I'm going to just save it on the desktop, and I'm going to call it selections.html. Notice all lowercase, no spaces, and the .html extension. I'm going to save that on the desktop. And then again, the exclamation point will allow me to press tab, which gives me kind of my basic structure for my HTML page. And then I'm going to type in here, testing selections and Booleans. There we go. And then in here, I'm just going to add an H1 testing selections. There we go. That's nice. And then I'm going to add a script tag. So we'll go ahead and add a script in here. And then what are we going to put in the script? Well, let's make some Booleans. I'm going to have var red, and I'm going to set that to a value of true. And then I'm going to have var blue, and I'm going to set that to a value of false. There we go. So I've got two values here. One is set to true and the other one is set to false. Now, if I were to make an if statement, if parentheses, and I were to check the value of those, red, I'm going to check the value of red. If red is true, which it is, then something's going to happen here. Something happens. Red is going to evaluate to true because I have true assigned to the red variable here. If I were to put blue in here, then this would not be true, in which case something else would happen. So I'm going to come down here and add else. Now this else statement, sometimes you'll see it up on the same line like this, and sometimes you'll see it on the next line like that. That doesn't really matter. That's a styling choice. Some people like to keep their code a little bit more compact and put it like this. Some people find it's a little bit easier to read if it's like that. So that's up to you. And then something else would happen here. Console.log the statement is false. And up here, we'll do console log the statement is true. Very exciting. Now we can try this out. We can come over here to our browser. I'm going to make a new tab here, and I'm going to open this file. Selections, open, and I've got my testing selections. If I right-click and choose inspect, I can go to the console, and sure enough, the statement is true. Now I can come back to my code editor, and if I change this to blue, blue is false, so this statement will run. So if I come back and then click refresh, now the statement is false. Or alternatively, I could change the value here to false, change that back to red, save that, and then come back and you'll see that in fact, it's still coming up false. One thing to note is I've added some extra spaces in here. Usually you won't see programmers doing that. Usually you'll see it more like this. I just add the extra space in there just to make it a little bit easier to read and a little bit easier to evaluate. But the spaces aren't necessary there. Oftentimes you'll see a space here, and that's fine too. But it's not necessary either down here. I think this one put a space in whether I wanted it or not, and that's fine. So, so red is either false or true, and blue is either false or true because I've used these Booleans here. True. The syntax highlighting should help you. If you spell true wrong like I just did, it should tell you, whoops, something's wrong there because the color isn't right. And now the statement is true. This is interesting. Let's try this. I'm going to make a variable called green and then see what happens if I pass green in here. Notice green doesn't have a value here. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to make a variable green and just put a semicolon. And then down here, I'm going to test green. Is green true or false? What do you think is going to happen here? Let's test that. The statement is false. This is an important thing to understand about JavaScript. Green is essentially undefined. It's an undefined variable. Undefined resolves as false in JavaScript. JavaScript has a concept of truthy and falsy, which is kind of fascinating. So things are either true-ish or false-ish. And they could be explicitly true or false, like red and blue are here, but they could be false-ish. And JavaScript treats variables that are undefined as false. Also, green equals null. That will be false. So that comes up false. Green equals 0. 0 is false. But if I put any other number in there, any other real number, like a 1, 1 is true. What about 100? That'll be true too. What about minus 100? That's true as well. So numbers are true except for 0. 0 is falsy. It's false-ish. So 0 comes up as false, which is kind of an interesting thing. So things that we know are false are undefined is false, null is false, 0 is false, false is false. Other things are true. What if I put like cheese? Cheese is true. So that's a very interesting thing about JavaScript. Let's look at comparing values. This is something we'll do a lot in JavaScript. So we often want to find out if the value here is the same as the value somewhere else. So I'm going to go back and leave green here as undefined, like so. And then I'm going to make a new variable, var mynum, and assign it the value of 5. And var other num, and assign it a value of 5. And then down here, I can check to see if mynum is the same as equals other num. It's really important to read this as the same as. This is assigned, 5 is assigned to other num, and 5 is assigned to mynum. But here I'm checking to see, is mynum the same as the other num? And in this case, it is. So if I save this and test this, you'll see the statement is true because mynum is the same as the other num. Okay, if I change this to a different number, then I'm obviously going to get false. That's not true. So the statement is false. They're not the same as. I can use, instead of equals, I could use exclamation point equals. And that'll be not the same as. So is that true? Is my num not the same as other num? Yes, that's true. Statement is true. So we can do this kind of thing as well. We can also check for greater than or less than. So we could say, is my num less than, is it less than my other num? And that should be true because my num is less than the other num. Let's see. And that statement is true. I could try, is it greater than? Is my num greater than the other num? Is that true? No, that's not going to be true because 5 is not greater than 6. But we can test for these different kinds of scenarios. My num and other num, we can use less than and greater than and check to see if that's true. Let's try this out. This is interesting. Var not num equals quote 5. So this 5 is a string with the number 5 in it. Now, can I check to see if my num is the same as not num? What do you think I'm going to get there if I save that and try that? The statement is true. Well, that's interesting. How can a 5 be the same as 5 inside quotes. Remember, JavaScript is loosely typed, and it allows for something called type coercion. So what's going on here is that JavaScript is saying, well, we've got a 5 here, and we've got a 5 in a string, and they're basically the same. So I'm going to call that true. So that's truthy. It's true-ish, sort of. You can think of it that way, which is very interesting. Now, again, this is the kind of thing that can drive programmers crazy, because you could end up making a mistake in your program or having something unexpected happen. And you don't want unexpected things to happen in your programs. That's never a good thing. So with, I believe it was ES5 in 2009, they introduced the triple equals operator, which is exactly the same as, and that won't do type coercion. And remember, this is the kind of thing that we're working with in JavaScript. They don't want to just get rid of the double equals or change what it does, because that would break other programs. That would break programs that have been happening in the past. But they can add another operator, which is the triple equals, and that one will not do the type coercion. So you'll notice this one will come up false. That statement is false because it won't do the type coercion. There's also the same thing with the exclamation point. So you could say that's not exactly the same as. So you can read this as, is my num exactly the same as not num? And the answer is no. Generally, it's considered better programming to use the triple equals sign everywhere. Often in our shorter scripts, it doesn't really matter, and you'll see me use equals equals all the time. But really, if you want to get into really good habits, always use the triple equals sign so that you don't ever have any type coercion unless you really want it for some reason. And again, this is kind of an odd thing about JavaScript that it can do this, but it makes the language very expressive, and that's kind of interesting. Expressive in the sense that, these things are kind of the same. A number 5, it's the same as the 5 in quotes. So that's kind of interesting. One more thing I want to check out here really quickly while we're here. I'm going to change this 5 to something like chicken. And then I'm going to make a new variable, var my value equals not num minus my num. What the what? I'm going to take a chicken and subtract 5. That doesn't make any sense. What happens if I put my value in here? You probably won't be surprised to see that that comes up false. That's false. And more than that, if I come down here and just console.log my value, just to see what's actually in that value, my value, when I try to take a chicken and subtract 5 from it, what do I get over here? Nan, not a number. Nan is another thing in JavaScript that is falsy. So in our list of things that are false are 0, false, undefined, null, and not a number. Those things all come up false in JavaScript. And that's kind of an important thing to keep in mind as we move forward with working with JavaScript and working with Booleans and when we're testing values. JavaScript has an else if so that we can run through a series of selection checkers to see which one is true. So let's type this out. It's always a good idea to practice this stuff as much as you can and get used to the syntax. Again, there are 2 humps to get over with JavaScript. And the first one is done just by practicing, by just writing the stuff and making mistakes and forgetting to put in the semicolon or the curly braces or the square brackets and seeing what happens when you get an error. So let's go ahead and type this in over here. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to add, maybe I want to comment this out. In Visual Studio Code, I can do Option, or in Windows, Alt, Shift A, and that'll put a comment around something that I've selected. So down here, I'm going to make a variable, var colors equals square bracket, quote, red, green, blue, yellow. And I'm going to make a variable var selected color equals colors, square bracket, I don't know, we'll do 3. Red is 0, 1, 2, 3. Now, over here, so I've got that, and that's great. Now I can do an if-else statement. So I could do if selected color is the same as equals red, or let's do red in quotes, red. If it's the same as red, then I can console log something out. Console.log the color is red. Now I can do an else if, and again, I can put else if on this line here, like so. I think it's a little bit easier to read if you move it down like this. Else if selected color. And here I'm going to cheat by copying and pasting. Else if selected color is blue. And again, I'm just adding these extra spaces because I think it's a little bit easier to read, but it's not really common practice, but that's okay. If the selected color is blue, then I'm going to console log out blue. Actually, I should do green. Green is next. It doesn't matter. I can go whichever order I want. In this, I'm just going to go to green because that sort of makes sense. And then I can copy and paste the else if. Selected color is, change this one to blue, blue. And if it's not red, green, or blue, then it must be yellow. Okay, great. So with this script in place, we can test this. We can come over here and refresh this, and you can see the color is yellow. It went through that list of items and chose the correct color. Whereas if I come up here and change this to a 1, so 0, 1, and I run this, you'll see I get the color is green. Now, what happens if I make a mistake? Suppose I put 4. 0, 1, 2, 3. Oops, there's no 4. Let's see what I get over here. You're going to get mistakes. You're going to have errors. And this said the color is yellow because the else ran, which was not really what I wanted, but it is sort of doing that kind of thing. Or let's see what happens if we do, what happens if I make a mistake and I forget to put commas in here. This is a common mistake that I see from students, is they'll forget to put the commas in the array. What happens if I do that? Uncut syntax error, unexpected string on line 29. So that gives you a notion that you should come back and take a look at line 29 and see what's going on in there. And hopefully, with this stuff in here, these little red underline stuff going on in here, you'll see that something's wrong there, and you'll put the commas back in. Very common mistake when we're starting with this thing. Okay, so you can try these different scripts and see how they work and what they do. It's really helpful to do that. JavaScript also has a switch statement, which will take a value, like selected color, and run it through a bunch of cases. In case it's red, it'll do this. In case it's blue, it'll do that. In case it's green, it'll do that. And then at the bottom, there's a default. You can add a default, and it'll do this if none of these other ones are true. It's important with selection that you add this break in here as well. So the break will keep the, will bump out of the switch when one of these true statements comes up. So let's take a look at this really quickly and see what we get over here. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to comment out these if-else statements. Again, I'm going to select them and then do Option or Alt-Shift-A in Visual Studio Code to quickly just comment those out. So I'm not running that anymore. And then down here, we can run a switch statement. Switch, parentheses, and I'm going to put in here the value I'm checking is selected color. And then the switch statement, I'm just going to paste it in here because it's a little bit tedious to watch me type it all, but I'm going to paste it in here. But I recommend that you type it. So type out case red colon console.log. The color is red, and then a semicolon. So that's the statement that's going to run, and then break. And it can be on the same line on my slide. I have it on the next line, but you can put it on the same line here. Rather than watch me type all of these, I'm going to just paste them in here. But you should type it in because learning the syntax, you'll learn it by typing it, not by watching me do it. So go ahead and make these files and type these in here so you can test it out. And then notice how I've got red, green, blue, and yellow. And up here, if I set selected color to 3, I should get, 0, 1, 2, 3, I should get yellow. So let's see if I get that, if I come over here and test this. And sure enough, the color is yellow. So that's coming up great. And I could change this to 0, which will get me the first one. So now I've got red, and that break is bumping me out of there. But if I were to set it to something past the end of my array, so 0, 1, 2, 3, if I set it to 4, the default will run, and I get, there was an error because I'm outside of my array. So the default option ran down here. I didn't actually create a JavaScript error. I could do that really easily by doing something like, I don't know, spell break wrong. Break. And it even looks different in my code because it's not the right color. So I could do that. Let's see what that does. Oh, it's still running. It's an error. because it didn't actually run that line, because that line wasn't true. If I set this up here to a 1, I think I'll get an error. Okay, uncut reference. Error, break is not defined on line 47. It did get the color is green, so it got that far in the script, and then it ran into a problem because I misspelled that. And I misspell things all the time. You will too. Don't worry about it. It happens all the time. Break. Or what if you forget a semicolon? Sometimes forgetting a semicolon will really set it off as well. Unexpected token break. on line 47. So these syntax are unexpected token. What does that mean? It's really expecting a semicolon token here, and it's seeing break instead. So it's confused by that. But these syntax errors, these error messages, are sometimes a little bit cryptic, and they take a little time to get used to them. But the switch statement is a great alternative for the else if. It takes up less space, and it can help you be very concise and specific with your code in a way that's helpful and useful. In JavaScript, we can check to see if multiple things are true by using the ampersand operator or the pipe operator. We'll look at the pipe operator next. But here we're using the ampersand operator, and we use two of them together here. And what we do is we check to see if this statement is true and if this statement is true. And for this whole thing to be true, when you use the AND operator, both of these must be true in order for this to run. So I have to be in a good mood and have gotten sleep in order for today to be a good day. If either one of these is false, then I'm going to be grumpy. So let's just test this one really quickly, because I think it's just a good idea to practice typing these. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to turn this one off. Again, Option or Alt Shift A, comments that out, and then I'm going to do var good mood and set that to true. Var got sleep and set that to true. And then I'm going to say if parentheses, good mood, ampersand, got sleep. If both of those are true, then I can console log today is a good day. Else, console.log, I am grumpy. Now we can test this and we can see that because both of these are set to true, the if statement is going to run. Today is a good day. However, if I were to go in and change it so that one of these was false, it doesn't matter which one, then this whole statement will come back false. And I am grumpy. So that's kind of an important tool in our toolkit, is we can check to see if two things are true. If two things are true, then we can do something. If either one of them is false, then something else is going to have to happen. Now we can also use the double pipe. The pipe is the key on the American keyboard above the return key. Shift in that key up there. It's also got the backslash on it. Okay, so we could also use the pipe. And the pipe is different in that it's an or statement. So here, got breakfast is true, got lunch is true, but got dinner is false. But if any one of these is true, then the if statement rings as true. So they would all have to be false for me to be starving. Let's give it a try. Comment all this out. Bar got breakfast equals true. Bar got lunch equals true. Var got dinner equals false. If got breakfast or got lunch, or got dinner. If any of those is true, then console log things are okay. I forget what I put on my slide, but that's good enough. And then down here, else, console.log. I am starving. And there we go. So I can test this over here. And you can see things are okay, even though one of those was false. I would have to make all of these false to really be starving. And there we go. Great. You've learned a lot about Booleans in this lesson and what's true and what's false, and that some things are true-ish and some things are false-ish or falsy and truthy. Like 0 is considered false in JavaScript, or undefined, or null, or not a number is false. These are all considered false in JavaScript. And you've already learned a lot of the basics of JavaScript, and we're going to keep going with these basics. And I know that these scripts don't seem particularly interesting yet, but I promise if you hang in there and keep working on this, then we will start making some interesting things pretty quickly. And we'll start manipulating content on web pages and doing all kinds of interesting stuff. So hang in there, keep going. And if you haven't had breakfast, lunch, or dinner, you're probably starving, so you should go eat something.